Black Mirror Season 1, Episode 1, The National Anthem. Yes, I'm back to do reviews over every single episode in Black Mirror. I'm posting a video every single day from here on out of every single episode. We did Season 7. Of course, it was fresh and new, but I've gone back and I've started to rewatch Black Mirror episodes, and I'm doing the same style of review that you guys have loved in the comments down below of the story, the concept, the characters, and of course the twist in the Black Mirror episode. Please do rewatch along with me. It'd be really cool to see what you think about these episodes and keep the conversation going in the comments down below. If you're not subscribed, please do drop a sub. This is of course the first episode of Season 1. Let's get into it. Spoiler warning ahead. The story of the National Anthem begins with the Prime Minister Michael being awoken in the middle of the night about a shocking discovery that the Princess Susanna has been kidnapped, and there's a ransom, a plea that they're giving that they want the Prime Minister to do. It's not anything traditional as he theorized. No, it's to with a pig. You know, you've seen it. I don't need to talk about it. I don't want to get demonetized. No, it's absolutely horrific. And I'm actually somebody that really does recommend Black Mirror to a lot of people. And of course, it's an anthology series. You don't have to start with episode 1, season 1. You can go with anything you want. But, you know, we always will go to season 1, episode 1. It's hard to then keep them encouraged to carry on watching when that's the story in episode 1. I promise you, this isn't that's very different from Black Mirror. It's not a show about doing stuff with animals. I promise you. And I promise you, a lot of you probably had a similar thing to that as well. If you're watching this, I'm sure you're a Black Mirror fan and you've encouraged other people to watch it. And I think, as the story is at face value, it is quite off-putting. It's quite, but as you watch the whole thing in its entirety, I think it does highlight some really, really interesting things about society as a whole, of course, as well as technology at the time. And I do say at the time because this episode came out 14 years ago in 2011. And I think what they're highlighting and discussing in this episode about that technology at the time has only just exaggerated and gotten worse as time's gone on. But we'll get onto that very shortly. Of course, the story develops further as we watch, a 43-minute episode that is probably about 7 hours, I feel like, in their time, frantically and very dramatically trying to figure out how they can maybe avoid doing the ransom thing that he's asked to do, or if they could find the princess herself. And I think that it's just so intense. This whole episode, you're on the edge of your seat watching it, and you're saying surely not. Especially if you're watching it for the first time. I remember when I watched it, I was like, yeah, surely not. What is Black Mirror about? But surely not. And you just watch the story go on, and of course it culminates in the way that it does. And I don't know. I think even though the story, the actual thing at the end of the episode is so out there, I do think it's one of the most notorious moments in Black Mirror. Even if you have watched the whole show in its entirety, that is still something that left a mark on you. And I think it's very interesting that, Black Mirror, the writers, Charlie Brooker, etc., really chose this as the first episode. I think throughout it, you do notice little things that this is more than just this ransom fee. It's like how the world is working, how society is working, how the population are working in this episode is so telling and so true to what I think would happen. And it's disgusting, not just the act, but how everyone moves about it. It is very, very off-putting as a whole. And it feels like it's a massive magnifying glass on us as a people, as us as a population. I think even just the fact that, when the act is actually happening and it's being broadcast, it's like a World Cup. It's like the World Cup final when England are playing. We're going to, of course, now move over to the concept. I think when you've watched all of Black Mirror, it's really interesting to go back to season 1 and watch this as a first episode, because it's so vastly developed from that first episode. The technology has become crazier and this, that, and the other. Whereas this episode feels very grounded. We're in the moment. We're following the Prime Minister as and his team as they're frantically trying to find a solution and find the princess. We're going over to the press team who are really frantically trying to decide whether they post a story or not. You're following the population saying, surely he's not going to do it. Surely he's not. It doesn't feel like later down the line Black Mirror episodes. And I don't think that's a negative or a positive. And it's very interesting because I know he's probably got a lot of stories in that noggin of his, but he chose this one to be first. And I think it's because it really does depict Black Mirror for what it is. It isn't necessarily about crazy new technological advancements. It's not necessarily about that. I think it's true bare bones thing that Black Mirror is about. The concepts are all about society. You know, the technology, how would it affect society? How would it affect the human beings, the people in the moment? And I think this episode is that in its bare bones. I think we follow just people and how they would deal with such a thing, and how social media and how technology, true to how we are in the real world, like how it can be volatile and spread things. Like, we don't care if we're necessarily spreading news that isn't real or true, but we will get it all out there, you know. We will spread it. We all have our phones and our devices with cameras. We want to be the first to capture things. You want to get things out there, you know. We saw with the person from the press team running into the dangerous scenario with her phone out, you know, very vividly just following her phone. You know, the people in the press, they want to be the first to get the story out. They don't care about any promises they gave. They want to be the first to do it. Is the media work in that way? And of course, every single person in the population in the country, they hated what they were seeing. You know, we hear, please can we turn it off? It's been going on for an hour. When they're watching the broadcast, they are watching it just disgusted, but they can't take their eyes off the screen. And I think that's what's being told here. We as a human race, we as a population, we are addicted to the screens, the stories, the news, everything. We just can't take our eyes off of it. And I think as a whole, like, I think it explored like herd mentality as well. Like, we saw with social media, it's so obvious how herd mentality can develop and grow. And of course, there's an episode later down the line, I believe it's season 3, that's incredible for herd mentality and things like that, which we'll go on to later down the line. But yeah, I just found this episode, like, it explored that. And I think social media just allows for that to develop further and make it more volatile. Like, even just the moment where they bring in the person they're going to try and, you know, spoof as the prime minister for the video. And there's someone outside the building and they take a picture, goes on social media, then it ruins their plans and the kidnapper finds out about it. Like, just something so simple as that, as a concept, just shows that we all have these devices that have unlimited access to unlimited people, and we can take something that's so simple in that moment but had such big ramifications. Of course, we find out it wasn't actually the princess's finger, but we just see all of that, just a domino effect happen there and then. Bing bong bosh, she's lost a finger, you know. Like, just like, I don't think, especially in 2011, we didn't know then, but it's so interesting watching it back now, knowing that we still haven't learned much from then, that we still do all of those things. Like, it was just a concept about just tech we have, which is very interesting. Moving over to the characters, and I don't think the characters really are individual characters in this episode, if that makes sense. I feel like there's 3 categories. There's the, you know, the head of the country, the prime minister and all of his team and his people. We've got the press, and then we've got the general population. I think those are the 3 categories within this episode. And as I've mentioned already, I think, of course, there's a massive magnifying glass and introspection on the general population and how they move in this episode, like all swarming to the screens when the broadcast happens, like a moth to a light. Like, they're all just coming in. You know, the general population. The press, I think, are really interesting, because the head of the team in the press in the very beginning of the episode, he's literally saying, we're not gonna go against their wish for us not to post anything and share this story. As soon as he finds out that company, that broadcaster, this, that, and the other posted it, he's like, this person, this. He already knew what he wanted. Like, you're on this duty, you're on that one. He was so on it straight away, instantly, because deep down he knew he always wanted to, but all he needed was one reason to do it. He didn't care about the ramifications of it. All he cared about was being the first to tell the story, which I thought was interesting. And then of course the prime minister, the head of the country, the team there, I thought it was an impossible job, and you can't help but feel for him, can you? You really can't, because it isn't blood on his hands and it isn't his fault. But then it shifts throughout the episode where they start basically telling him, oh yeah, you're screwed if you don't do it. You have to do it. And you're just dealing with this idea from him that when he's thrown up afterwards, it's genuinely horrific, like, just to even fathom that in the moment. And I think it is an interesting, again, like, talking about the characters, I think it's an interesting thing where we as a general population, we don't care when it's somebody else dealing with something. We're so quick to pass judgment and act as what we would do in a certain scenario, but we're not in those shoes. So, like, how can we do that? And that's what we explore in this episode, is those 3 categories of those characters. And I think that's what he wanted. I don't think he wanted it to be individuals. I think it was, you know, this is us as a population, as people. And I thought was really interesting, by the way, was when the broadcast was happening, one of the subgroups of people that were very much watching the broadcast were nurses and doctors. So I feel like it was like really highlighting that, you know, deep down to our core, we're all just, you know, moths to a flame, and we want to all go towards this thing, even though we might have more pressing matters at the time. Another subtle thing as well was I just thought, you know, first of all, the person that was part of the press, I can't remember her name, but she was sending pictures of herself to somebody in the Prime Minister's team. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, she would do something so exposing and so, you know, drastic just to get some information so that she could be the first to tell a story. And I just thought that was really intriguing. And then, of course, he was willing to risk his whole career for just something like that as well. And you know, risk the Prime Minister, risk the princess, like such a drastic thing to tell. And he was so quick to, again, similar to the press team, similar to a lot of them, so quick to not follow through with what they initially said they would. Shows that we're all kind of fickle, you know, as human beings. And I thought that was really, again, quite interesting to look into. Just wanted to add, there's obviously that long, prolonged, annoying sound being played to alert viewers to stop watching the broadcast. And that is also, I believe, Charlie Brooker and the Black Mirror team telling us as an audience watching Black Mirror to stop watching. You know, yet we still continue with the annoying sound. We continue on and watch the horrific ending. And it's like a meta sort of like double-edged sword where we are the population still watching that broadcast, even though we're the audience watching Black Mirror. I thought that was quite cool. Finally, the twist. And what I find really interesting with this episode, and I will talk as we go on about this season, I don't necessarily think the twist is like massive. I think the twist is actually, of course, told to us quite simply at the end. That the person who committed the crime and was the kidnapper and did all of this was Turner Prize winner Carlton Bloom. So he was doing it as like an art piece, and everyone was really intrigued about it. But I think, of course, that character and the person who done it is representative of Charlie Brooker, of you know, Black Mirror and the team behind it, because they're the one that are sending this message themselves. So I found it interesting that they made it clear what the message was at the end of the episode. You know, the fact that he released the princess 30 minutes before, and it was just merely, you know, an act because he knew that the streets would be empty. It was just merely an expose on us as a people. But that's exactly what Black Mirror, the team and the creators were doing as well. So it was kind of meta in that sense. And I thought that was quite interesting. But again, I didn't think the twist was like twist, you know, it was very just like, yeah, this was it the whole time. And you're like, oh yeah, I kind of got that, but oof. But then again, I asked myself, did I get it because I've watched so much Black Mirror now, and maybe when I first watched it, it was a big twist, maybe. And also the fact that he actually did the act was also quite a big twist, because as I said, when you're watching it at the beginning, you're like, there ain't no way. There's no way they're going to do this as a first episode of a show. Imagine pitching that to Channel 4, Charlie Brooker. How did you do that? Yeah, network team. I've got this great idea for a fantastic show. Basically, the premise of the first episode is the Prime Minister has sex with a pig. Oh, you actually want to do this? Okay, let's go ahead. You know, how did he do that? How did he do that? So that's what I think about this episode as a whole. But what did I rate it out of 10? I rated it a 7 out of 10. It's a decent episode. I think it's a bit lackluster in places when you compare it to later down the line episodes, but I don't think that takes away anything from it. I think the actual like intensity, edge of your seat, sort of like on the ground, following the people in all their subcategories, as I mentioned, I thought it was really, really cool and interesting. And I actually want to put my hand up and say, I watched this episode once. This is the second time I ever watched it. When I first watched it was when I first ever watched it. And I don't think I gave it the credit that it deserved. And it made me very excited to carry on watching the whole of Black Mirror, because some of them I have not watched since I was 16. I'm now 25. You know, my opinions of things have definitely shifted. I'm going to be moved. I'm going to feel things when I watch these that I wouldn't have felt before. So I'm very intrigued, and I definitely enjoyed this episode more than I remembered it. I genuinely would have thought I gave this episode like a 5, but it's genuinely a 7. Could have pushed higher, but I don't know if I want to push it higher yet. But there you go, it's locked in 7 out of 10. And as you can see on the screen right now, this is what we're going to be doing. Throughout all of this, I'm going to be adding a new one to this table, and we're going to see what comes out on top at the end of it, okay? Make sure you drop a sub if you haven't subbed already. As I said, we're going to go through every single episode of Black Mirror. If you want to see more from me, please do come through to the Twitch stream. The link's in the bio. You can join us over there, and the Discord as well. You can continue the conversation and join us as a community. I'd really, really appreciate it. But thank you for coming on through. I've been Floppyleggs, and I'll see ya when I see ya.